PR Connections Radio presents Ethics Realty is a full-service real estate agency that provides a service for finding the ideal property for residential, commercial, and investor-centered clients. Whether you're a first-time buyer or a seasoned buyer or investor, they provide service to all and listen to understand your goals and needs. For more information about their wealth and investment-centered services, call 702-518-1606 or visit their website, ethicsrealty.net.
Well, welcome to JP's Teachers Lounge, Season 1, Episode 10. And we finally got together. Thank you for being patient. My good friend and former colleague, Jim Blockey, is running for Congress. And I'm just very thankful that you can make it. So welcome, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, it has been tough. I mean, it was actually our fault on this end. We had technical difficulties, and so we corrected them.
It happens. I've had some issues.
We just used a different computer.
Yeah. Well, I've had some issues with setting up, doing the questionnaire and the scheduling, because it's kind of, this is my first ever podcast, and so it's always pre-recorded, but when I fill it out, I would write it out wrong, like it's live and it's not, and then Dana would send me a text or an email, is it live or not? So it happens. It's all part of the process. We've worked together. We worked together for only a couple of years, but it seemed longer.
Seemed forever. That's right. Seemed forever. That's right.
In a good and also kind of bad way. I mean,
yeah, we were at a different school.
Yeah,
it was a different kind of school. Teaching expelled kids it's just a different scenario than people can really wrap their heads around.
Yeah, you're right, and I know we're gonna reminisce, and the 30 minutes are probably gonna go by really quickly, but we'll reminisce and we'll take it as it goes. I have some questions prepared, but again, we're gonna kind of lead it the way it goes. But I remember, again, and you said I had good memory. I do have a good memory usually. I remember one of the things you said when I first started school there. You were talking about boundaries. Kids don't act up.
Yeah, kids don't test the parameters to see what they can get away with. They test the parameters to make sure they're there.
Exactly. And then I remembered you gave a great analogy about living on a New York penthouse.
Right. It's actually was in my book.
Right. But I think but you also said it before, I think.
Oh yeah.
You had the idea. You had the idea before. Mm-hmm. And it's so funny because for me, there's a lot of problems with like not just in schools, but just out in the community where people have this. I think people get confused between judging people, not judging their behavior versus judging them. As a teacher, my first couple of years as a teacher, I'd come home just exhausted, just because it was a fight. It was a fight, and it's I would like to send kids out. It was like, it was just a way to get rid of them. And then I realized, and I was judging them, and that's not the right way. You got to judge your behavior, judge your decisions, but don't judge them as people. Back in 2016, when our school closed, they did the restructuring, I went from Biltmore to a middle school in the school district, And from 2006 to 2016, I was not in a traditional, traditional public school. And
It was
what?
expelled. Kids tell you, everybody should know that we taught kids that were expelled. So they were actually kicked out of their school. They were expelled from their school because of usually not one incident. Usually there was several. We had one kid who was RPC'd, which is a required parent conference, over 50 times before he got expelled, and that was in a 1-year period. And so, the 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 tolerance level that they had was way too strong. And so,
Well, right.
yes,
Well,
when
right.
you went from the expelled school to a regular school, it probably was crazy.
Well, it was crazy because I don't know what it just seemed like even though Biltmore was tough, in some ways it was easier because we didn't have to deal with a whole lot of stuff and so you go from 2006, 2016. Well, what happened during that time? Social media, then the cell phones. And when I went back to regular school in 2016, I realized, heck, I have 20, 25 kids, like Biltmore type kids in my classroom. And it was just overwhelming.
Mhm.
It was just, it was just, I mean, like they definitely lost it. And it seemed like ever since I came to the school district back in 1999, there was always it just seemed like there was this attitude in the administration where they couldn't control the kids. So let's try to control the teachers and try to control
Right.
the teachers. Did you seem to have that kind of
It was
sense
wherever
too?
it was wherever I went. Excuse me, wherever I went, we didn't the principals didn't really want to have to deal with parents. And that was the problem. And the deans, they don't want to deal with parents. And
Right.
if you kick a kid out of your classroom, they have to deal with them. So they're the ones that have to deal with the kid, and they don't like that, which that's their job. And that's
Right.
what they should be doing. And if they did it correctly, it wouldn't take so much. Like I said before, I mean, kids don't test the parameters to try to get away with things. They just test them to make sure they're there. And so they keep testing these parameters and they can't find them. And it's like if you're in that 21-story building and if you don't have a wall, if you go try to test that parameter, which is the wall, and the wall's not there, and you take another step, you're going to fall 21 stories to your death. And what the deans and the principals, what their job is to, if you have a problem in your classroom, you want to get rid of that problem. Because you see, every time you're dealing with that discipline problem, that takes away time for teaching all the other kids. And a study was done, and they said it actually discipline problems took anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes per class period. And if you figure that out on a weekly basis, you're losing one class per week. One class period per week. That's like you're absent once a week. You're absent 20% of the time because you're dealing with a child a student that is a discipline problem. He won't do what he's told. And how do they expect us to be able to teach without being able to have a full 5 days? That's like, in a semester, that's 18 absences in a semester. 30 absences, 36 absences in a year. That's what you're dealing with, and that's what the problem is. Now, also the problem, that's the discipline problem. I always said the discipline problem should be handled by the principal and the administration. That's their job. And my job is to teach kids. My job isn't to manage my classroom. If I wanted to be a manager, I'd work at Taco Bell. And so I wanted to teach the kids. And so if a kid was a problem, I gave him a chance or so, but there came a time when I just said, okay, you got to get out of here and you got to leave. And it's up to the principal who needs to support you. And you'll find that the best teachers and the best classes or schools, you'll find them where the principal deals with the discipline problems and deals with it harshly and tells the parents, hey, look, you have to deal with your child. He needs to act differently in the classroom. He needs to keep his mouth shut, and listen. And if he has a question, respectfully ask the question. And, it's simple. The discipline problem is simple if you deal with it correctly. And the excuse for the school districts, well, then they're going to end up on the street. Well, that's not my problem. That's not the school district's problem. That's the parents' problem. And so
Well,
I want to teach that kid, but if he doesn't want to learn, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Well, you can throw a kid in a classroom, but you can't make him learn.
right. Um, I hear what you're saying, and I'll play the devil's advocate, kind of do a little pushback here. But I mean, if a kid ends up on the street, it may not be our fault, but it's certainly now it's everyone's problem. I
Well,
think
it's the
I think
problem. It's not the problem of the school district.
Right.
That's not in our job curriculum. Our job curriculum is to teach kids, and we teach so much extracurricular stuff. Sex ed, multiculturalism, transgender, and all this kind of stuff. They spend so much time on that. They don't have time for the core subjects, anyways. But that becomes a societal problem, which which is a parental problem, and parents want to be friends with their kids. And they want us to raise them. They want us to be the bad guy. I don't want to be the bad guy. I want to teach the kids. I want you to be a parent. And
I agree.
And that's and if they're not willing to be the parent, then it becomes more of a societal problem. And the law needs to deal. If they're out in the streets, if they're truant, they need to deal with that.
Yeah. No, I agree. And we're definitely we're talking about politics. So in a sense, we're going to get into it too. It just seems like because it seems like the schools, at least the public schools, are all run by mostly Democrats.
We call them LAWA Democrats, is what our campaign is calling them. LAWA Democrats. That's liberals, liberal agenda to weaken America. And that's the kind of Democrats, and that's the kind of people that are running our school systems. You're exactly right.
Well, yeah, because it just seems like, again, like let's talk. I'm going to give it a good analogy with the border. And when Biden was in office, the border was wide open. As I think you said this before, Democrats love chaos. That's what that's their end game, or that as long as there's chaos. And so it makes sense that they want schools to do everything. Instead of doing one or two things correctly or things right, they want just throw it in there, everything but the kitchen sink, or even the kitchen sink. I don't want an open border, but I don't really want a closed border either. How about a monitored border? How about a border with common sense?
And we do have that. It's called legal immigration.
Right.
And, we just can't have people coming in right and left because we can't afford that.
Yeah, but then
our society can't afford that many people.
We'll be deemed racist because,
well,
I know.
I've been deemed a lot worse than that, and that. That's one of the problems I went through. There was being accused of that, and nothing can be further from the truth. But see what Republicans are supposed to do. Real Republicans, they talk about policies, and that's what you see with Trump. He talks about policies. What people talk about Trump, they never talk about his policies. They bash him. They call him names. They're name callers, and that's what the LAWA is all about. That's what LAWA Democrats do, is they brand you with a name, and they to make you look bad. Because you see, if you're bad, then your policies are bad. That's what they did with our founding fathers. They made them out to be racist pigs. And so therefore the Constitution isn't all that great. And so now you see the Constitution being really weak right now. Laws are not being enforced. Mm-hmm. But if you're a Democrat, you can do whatever you want. You can riot in the streets, burn buildings down, and it's peaceful. If you're a Republican and you sneeze on the street, you get thrown in jail for, littering on the street.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's well, I mean, what are your plans? For education, at least for Nevada. What needs to change right away, and what are some realistic changes that can be made?
Well, the changes are really simple, and it's not just for Nevada. It's for nationwide. You see, the Supreme Court, they took prayer out of school in 1962. And in their opinions afterwards, they said, it's when it comes to religion, schools must remain neutral. Well, let me tell you something. Abortion, same-sex marriage, transgender, selfishness, none of those are neutral. Those all go directly against our religion of Christianity. They go directly against it. So they shouldn't be teaching it. That's like literally goes directly against the Supreme Court decision when they took her out of school. And so my goal is, if I can, when I get in this time, we'll be able to talk to President Trump, and he's an enforcer. He enforces the rule. That's all they did with immigration. They didn't change any laws. All they did was start enforcing the laws that exist. And that's what I would try to do with.
Well, right. That's really the bottom line is, a law is only as good as it is enforced.
That's right.
Either you enforce it, or you get rid of it, or you change it, or you do something, but just enforce it.
Enforce it equally.
Right. When you were talking about, same sex, transgender, all that are not neutral, it goes against Christianity. It's like what they say and what they really mean are two different things. That's what they say, but what they really mean is anything anti-Christian, anti-tradition, anti-tradition. You have
who says that? Where is that in the?
No. What I'm
laws?
My interpretation when the far left talk about getting prayer out of school so that everything remains neutral, and you were talking about certain issues that are against Christianity.
Right.
What I mean?
Not neutral. That's not neutral. Transgender, homosexuality, even sex outside of marriage, all that stuff, that goes directly against my religion.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying is that what they're really saying is they say that they want equality, that to take out prayer from school. What they say and what they really mean are two different things. So what they really mean is, as long as it's anti-Christian or anti-American or anti-tradition, then it's okay. That's right. That's my interpretation.
That's right. That's the Lawa Democrats.
Yeah.
And the Lawa Republicans as well, because there are Republicans the same way. If you there's no way to interpret neutrality being neutral any other way than there's no gray area. It's nothing. I can't teach about Christ. You can't teach against Christ. I can't teach the Bible. You can't teach the Quran. All religion has to be out. And so it's simply what will happen there. And see what and a lot of Christian parents believe this too. They believe that the school's responsible for raising our children. And that's not what the education system was for. It was to teach them how to read and write, teach them about math, a little science, the history of this country, and especially K through 6. You don't need anything else. You don't need the arts. You don't need if you want your kid to learn how to play an instrument, well, there's a lot of people out there that who are willing to teach you. But throw that in, because you see, it was the arts. That's where they got their liberal agenda snuck in. That's how they snuck it in there, is through the arts and stuff. So that's what it just needs to stop. Parents, you teach your kid about sex. Parents, you teach your kid about selfishness and how to be etiquette. But when your kid comes to school, if he's disrespectful, he's going to be removed. That'll teach him how to be respectful. If you want your child in school, then you have to teach him he better be respectful. Teachers don't really, teachers care about the money, but teachers are pretty smart. They went to college. They realize they're not going to get paid $500,000 a year. They're never going to get paid probably, $150,000 a year, because that would just cost the taxpayer too much. You couldn't afford it. Right. So they're smart enough to realize that. What school teachers really want, and when I was in there, I talked to a lot of them. They want they want better working conditions. They don't want to go to school and have to worry about some 6-year-old tell them to go blank themselves, and then the principal come down and holler at you for kicking them out of class for that. And
that's why I've I've been at this Christian school for 6 years now, and that's why I'm still there. Because yeah, I mean the pay's not great, but I have autonomy, I have support. It's a good support. It's a good, a very positive environment, and the administration doesn't play around. They fired teachers the last 3 years. They fired a couple teachers. They just didn't make the standards. But going back to the schools thinking that it's their job to do all this and everything like that. I remember last president, or no, it was the governor. It was the governor race between Sisolak and Lombardo, and I remember watching one of their debates, or maybe it was the only debate. I don't know. And Sisolak was talking about like when a girl gets pregnant and she gets an abortion, they're not allowed. They don't have to notify the parents. And a comment he made was, what if the father or the uncle or someone in the family was actually the person who raped her with the baby and I'm thinking to myself, first of all, how often? I mean, how often does that happen? And that's his excuse. Right. Thank God he's not the governor anymore. Thank God. That was his excuse for saying, don't ask the parents. But there is this worldview, or whatever you want to call it, where the left, maybe the extreme left, maybe not the moderate Democrats, but maybe the extreme left, to them government is the answer to everything. Remember, Reagan said the
11 most dangerous words are, "I'm here from the government and I'm here to help."
Right. I had a shirt of that somewhere. Right. I mean, because
wait a second, James, where do you think the world learned that? Where do you think our country learned that mentality of the government knows best? They learned it in our schools, because that's what they teach in our schools. And so now we have parents who've been through public schools. We have grandparents who've been through that public schools. We have a 40% illiteracy rate, adult illiteracy rate. 40% adult illiteracy rate in this country. Before they changed the method of how to teach how to read, it was 2%. Dyslexia was 1 in 1,000. It's 200 in 1,000 today, after they changed the method of how to teach how to read. You don't think that was planned? They knew about it. Rudolph Flesch told everybody about it all the time. He's the one who wrote Why Johnny Can't Read and Why Johnny Still Can't Read. It's out there. They know why it's being done, but they don't change it. Why? Because they have the outcome they want. They have people growing up think the government knows best.
And I was reading. I don't know if you heard of Corey DeAngelis. Wrote a good book called The Parent Revolution, and one of the things he talked about in his book was either he made the comment, or that he was speculating, is the public school, like with the unions and everything, is it just an adult jobs program? Like for when we talk about the unions, and because unions, the teachers unions are really powerful. They tend to back Democrats.
99.9% is kind of like more than a tendency.
Right. You're right. That was an understatement. But do you agree with that to a certain extent the schools are basically an adult jobs program?
I'm not sure what that. An adult jobs program.
Well, in other words, the unions are just taking care of the teachers so that they can keep the union dues going, and they could just, because you talk about, if you had what is it, 40% literacy rate,
adult literacy rate.
Yeah, and I mean, if you hired somebody to, let's say you owned a restaurant and you hired somebody to run your restaurant, and at the end of the year, your business dropped 40%. What are you going to do with that person?
Well, they'd be fired.
Exactly.
I mean,
That's my
but I
point.
mean, no one's getting fired in the school district because
Right.
what is happening is exactly what they wanted to happen. John
Mhm.
Dewey was a very, very well-known socialist, and he's the one who put together this method of teaching how to read the look-say method, which is pictures with the alphabet. See Johnny run. See Jane run after Johnny. And so they have pictures of Jane and Johnny running. And you see, the thing is that pictures is one side of the brain and the alphabet's the other side of the brain. And when you put those two together, it jumbles everything up and it causes dyslexia. People, the 1 in 1,000 people who had dyslexia before were geniuses usually. Einstein, he had dyslexia. A lot of these people had dyslexia. Dr. John Petrick, he has dyslexia. He can read faster backwards than he can forward. So he can look at something and read it backwards faster. He's a genius, and that's the kind of people. So it was actually not a terrible thing, dyslexia. But now these people with dyslexia, they can't read. They can't understand what they're reading, which is even more important. So the 40% who are illiterate can read. They can read a little bit, but they don't understand it very well. So they have to listen to Don Lemon and people like that, and that's who they listen to, Rachel Maddow. And they listen to them, and they have to listen to them because they have no way of finding out for themselves if they're right or not. That's a problem. And that's what they want. That's what's called
Yeah.
socialism, because they want the government to take care of them.
Right. Yeah. You're talking about like, illiteracy rate and graduation rates. I'm not. I haven't checked the latest graduation rates for Clark County, but I think at one time, maybe I don't know, maybe it was 7 or 8 years ago, they were boasting an increase in graduation level, but they also took out the proficiency exams, the required proficiency exams,
That's right.
and it just seems like, you know if I mean
Now,
if
here's
you
here's an interesting statistic for you, or not statistic,
look
but an interesting fact. When you take math classes, you're allowed to use your calculator from kindergarten on. They don't make them learn their multiplication and addition tables, which also leads to critical thinking. But okay, so you're using a calculator for 13 years, 12, 13 years. Then they get to take their proficiency exam. And guess what? They're not allowed calculators. So, few people, only the ones who bother to know their multiplication tables pass the math proficiency exam. I mean, think of the
they're being
common
set up
sense
for
or the
failure.
lack thereof.
They're being set up for failure.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes sense. And the whole again, trying to make things look better, and in but the substance is doesn't reflect that. I just I that's what really gets me sometimes is, first of all, you're not going to you're not going to change things overnight. It's What's important is to have a steady increase, but you need to create a good environment, a positive environment, a supportive environment with discipline and principals and leaders who are not worried about, or worried more about the school instead of their their uh, their promotion, their next promotion or whatever. But
They
uh,
worry.
you
They
know,
worry about statistics a little bit, but they don't care. I mean, just okay. Uh, I was right before I got my teaching certificate. I was at um, middle, yeah, middle school. They called it middle school back then. And Wayne Tanaka was the principal there. Now I was a substitute for PE, and this kid wouldn't listen to me. I said, "Look, you have to do this," and he didn't follow instructions at all. And so I says, "Okay, you can't participate in this in the game that whatever we were doing. So there was three teachers. There was two other teachers in there at the time, and I said, so I said, excuse me, I got to go to the restroom real quick. I went to the restroom. That kid attacked me in the locker room. He jumped me. And so, I mean, I was a lot bigger than him. So I pinned him against the wall and I says, what are you doing? It's not very smart. And, and so I said, are you cool now? Are you done? He said, yeah. So I let him go, went to the restroom, came out, and I told him what happened. And they said, you need to write up a incident report on that. As I was writing the incident report, I was called to the office, to Wayne Tanaka's office. I got in there. The two parents and the kid were all sitting there with Tanaka. They were sitting down. I was standing over there, and they asked me what happened. I explained what happened, and real quickly, and then the parents and Tanaka and the child all interrogated me for about 5 minutes. And at the end of that, Principal Tanaka said, I think you just had a misunderstanding. So, Mr. Blockey, would you apologize to the student? And I said, what? And I said, he said, yeah, it was just an understanding. Now, you're trying to get a job to teach, aren't you? And he goes, yeah. He goes, well, you have to learn to play the game. So you need to apologize to the kid. So I apologized to him and walked out of there going, what did I get myself into? And is this what I'm going to have to suffer through? And now Tanaka, they named a school after him. He goes around telling his method of teaching, how his method worked. And the reason his teachers were real happy and all that, he had a turnover. Teachers they hated working for him. Because I talked to them all out there. They hated it. They were looking to get out. There's only certain teachers who wanted to be there because he always took the student's side no matter what, except if you were one of his pet teachers. And so you can make things look good very easily by skewing the statistics. You've heard the 4 out of 5 dentists all preferred Crest, right?
Mm-hmm.
But did they ask 15 dentists? And 4 out of 15 actually did it, but they just eliminated 10 and said,
right.
It's not a lie. It was 4 out of 5,
right.
But they manipulated and I'm not saying Crest did that. I'm just using it as an example.
No, they find which ones are gonna agree with them,
right? And then they just get rid of the rest of them. So you can manipulate statistics and facts to meet what your criteria wants to, what you want to do with it. And I mean, anybody who sees the world today, see this disrespect that kids have for adults. I mean, they go around punching at older people and the socking thing where they were going around punching people. And most of the time it was older people. I mean, you can see that kind of disrespect. That's because of what they learned in our schools. Mm-hmm. And their parents just want to be their friends. So they didn't learn anything at home. So they're learning this in the school. That's the kind of thing that needs to change is, okay, I'm not going to tell you what to do at home, but I am going to tell you what that kid's going to do in my classroom. And the principal better back that. And if he has to deal with an irate parent, well, he needs to tell that parent, well, your kid's acting like a fool. That needs to stop because we're not going to do that. They have schools that actually do that. I remember, remember Scott?
We got to wrap up.
Okay.
We got to wrap up. But we've only just begun to scratch the surface. And I want hopefully you can come back again and we can continue. Sure. Again, I really appreciate you coming. Where can people reach you on your website?
Real simply, my website is Blockey, 4congress.com, blockeyforcongress.com. We have a social media person. I have a campaign strategist, and we just have a lot going for us. And, we're just moving forward. We started during the Christmas season. We're not doing a lot, and it's not a great time to raise funds, but we raised over 10 grand in that time period. And so that's what we're out doing. We're trying to raise money. And there are people out there who want somebody who's going to stand up, not just for this, but they're going to stand up for education, but they're going to stand up for abortion. abortion's a terrible thing. And seeing like my opponent in the primary, Carrie Buck, people don't realize she tells everybody she's pro-life, but there's been 3 bills in the last 2 sessions in 23 and 25, abortion bills. She voted for all 3 of them. Excuse me.
Yeah,
and
well,
one of those actually went against the Constitution. So I mean, it's just
we know how that works, because look at all the many Democrats that voted against protecting women's sports. You know, a lot of that is just politics.
But Carrie Buck's a Republican. She's my primary candidate.
Yeah,
and that's the kind of thing, you know, men and women's sports. You don't see a problem with women in men's sports,
right?
But I mean, that's the kind of thing that people like about me, is that I'm going to stand up for godly principles, godly moral principles. And when I say God, I'm talking about the Father of Jesus Christ. Because, you know, when you say God today, nobody really knows who you're talking about. I know who the God is. There's only one true God, and he's the Father of Jesus Christ. And every time I go and speak somewhere, whenever I mention God the first time, I always have to preface this with, I'm talking about God, the Father of Jesus Christ. I'm not talking about that tree over there or that chair over there. I'm talking about the one and only God. And people know that I'm truthful. People know that I'm going to tell them what I feel. Yeah. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, and I'm not going to manipulate the truth.
I've always appreciated that, and I'm glad we had this time to talk. Hopefully you can come back again and again. I appreciate it, and
we'll talk more about the campaign next time.
Yes, okay, definitely. That'll be the focus. Well, thanks for everyone for joining in on JP's Teachers Lounge, visiting with our next Congress representative, Mr. Jim Blockey. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Classy Communications provides public relations and marketing solutions for businesses, professionals, and nonprofit organizations. They can deliver the true meaning of your business with press releases, social media marketing, web development, email marketing, book publishing, and much more. Wherever your potential clients are, they can help you connect with them. Visit classycommunications.net to learn more about their suite of services that can help your business stand out from the rest. Classy Communications is your solution for business success. PR Connections Radio thanks you for watching this podcast. Check out more episodes of this show and our others at prconnectionsradio.com.